people who really thought what we were doing was evil. I would tell how this wood was rescued, how it was storing carbon, how it was, helping the environment, helping local economies. These trees were not harvested for their timber value.
Today we have Jennifer Alger with us, a visionary in the realm of urban wood. As president of Far West Forest Products and Wood-Mizer, California, Jennifer has been in the business of salvaging urban wood for over 25 years, and she's a leading force in the formation of new nationwide standards for urban and salvage timber use. Her latest projects include innovative inventory management systems like Ancestry and the USRW Certified Urban Wood Store in Northern California. We sat down with her to get her insights on promoting sustainability and business growth in the urban lumber sector and the exciting opportunities she envisions nationwide.
Welcome. Hi, I'm Vadim, and I'm your host today. We today have Jennifer from Far West Forest Products with us today, and my co-host, Jake. So excited to have you both here today. Would like to dive in and learn more about Jennifer, your different experiences, things that you're involved in, and dive into the world of wood from your perspective. This is Jennifer is a mutual friend, so I'd like you to maybe share a little bit about how you guys met.
Well, let's see. I started working at Wood-Mizer back in 2011. I was hired in my first project. I was living on the West Coast, and so we went to the Oregon Logging Conference together. My boss in Indiana, marketing manager there at Wood-Mizer, says, "You're going to go hang out with Jennifer for a weekend. You're going to learn a lot about sawmilling." So that was how we met. That was 12, 13 years ago. And then throughout the years, Jennifer is a ASC, basically a distributor for Wood-Mizer in California. And so, we work together quite a bit as I'm in marketing, and she was one of our distributors. So
that's incredible. Jennifer, could you share a little bit about your background and kind of how you got to where you are today?
Well, I grew up in a traditional wood industry family, and my dad was in the commercial timber falling industry in California. Kind of took a dive in the 80s, and so in 1983 he formed a company, and all of us kids right there with him helping, and he formed a company called Far West Forest Products. And in the 90s I started to take over the management of a company, specifically the marketing of a company. And, things had changed so much Wood-Mizer had asked us to represent them as Wood-Mizer products for California and Nevada. And so we had done that, but we were also, because we were running a mill, and so we were producing lumber, we were producing wood products. And so I put my marketing hat on, and I'm like, boy, what differentiates us? What makes us different from other people running Wood-Mizer, selling lumber, and doing these types of things? And coming from a traditional wood world in California in the 80s, we got a lot of people who really thought what we were doing was evil. It's you're destroying the environment, you're killing trees, you're all of these things, and so I started to learn about wood and how beneficial trees are for humans, for the environment, for societies, for economies. But then I also learned how good wood is in building properties and how it's one of the most sustainable, reliable products that there is. And it's regenerative, and all of these other building materials cannot say that. But then I looked at, when I'm looking at specifically what does Far West do, I realized that Far West is using woods that are urban, they came from an urban environment. They're salvaged, so forest salvage. Maybe it's a gas or power line cut for right of ways or fire prevention mitigation. That wildland interface area where fire might get a little too close to an urban environment, and those were being removed. And then deconstruction, And so, deconstructed materials. So we were working with 3 different main types of woods. And I thought, well, that's my marketing thing. These woods would have gone into the waste stream had they not been salvaged. And one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that wood, if it decomposes, that carbon's emitted into the atmosphere. That's most people's concern with wood utilization, that the trees aren't there anymore. But these trees were not harvested for their timber value. They're down anyways. So if we can stop that decomposition process, if we can stop these from burning, that carbon is literally locked inside that wood. And so I was thinking about it, and I'm like, oh my goodness, we're helping. We were criticized as kids for the industry that we were in California, but what we're doing is beautiful. What we're doing is actually benefiting the environment. And I decided to start marketing that. And I decided it was such a new concept, even though we had been doing it all along. That's where we were getting our wood most of this time. But I decided that we needed to market this and we needed to brand this. And I couldn't do it alone. And so I literally began to train my competition. So that was my next thing, was to go, okay, how many more people can I bring into this? So that, my way of thinking was, everybody knows that they need all, certain types of products. But this is such a unique product that if I don't bring a team to the table to market it, we're never going to compete with traditional, the traditional timber industry. And in so many ways, we partner with the traditional timber industry. So it's not like we're at odds with them, but then we're able to go, okay, wood, when can we use wood in buildings? I know mass timber, they're starting to look at, ways to do that, and even bringing urban wood into that. And, how can we offset some of the other building materials that we're using now? Concrete, steel, other things. And then in design, even plastics come into that.
That's incredible. Thanks for the quick glimpse and the quick synopsis of your story. I guess to begin, could I ask you a really fundamental question? What is urban wood, and how do you define that?
So urban wood is any wood that was not harvested for its timber value. That's primary. And it can come from a couple of different sources. It can come from an urban environment, like our urban city trees, when those need to be removed, and they all do. Everything has a life cycle. They can come from salvaged trees, like, along our highways. And urban wood can come from deconstruction, deconstruction of repurposed buildings.
All right. So we've discussed Far West Forest Products, which is your family-owned sawmill, correct?
Yes, Sawmill and Lumber Company, correct.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then you're also a distributor and do customer service, et cetera, for Wood-Mizer. So as Wood-Mizer, California.
Correct.
Right. And then there's a little thing called the Urban Wood Network. Can you give us a brief overview of what that is?
Yeah. So the Urban Wood Network is something that formed. Well, to back up, I was saying a moment ago that I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed to bring in people who could build this brand with me. And so I networked informally for decades. I networked with other people who, this person has a sawmill. Okay, let's talk about recycling these urban trees. And so I would train them and network informally and put together arborists with sawmill owners, with cities who had trees coming out, and just really connecting all those dots and working a lot with CAL FIRE as urban and community forestry program, and Sacramento Urban Tree Foundation or Tree Rescue, and California Urban Forest Councils. And so just working with all these organizations to repurpose this wood. And so then in, I think, 2016, I formed a nonprofit. Friendly Cal Fire is like, okay, we can help more with this, but you're going to need a nonprofit. Like we need to formally network and put some structure to this. And so I formed Urban Salvaged and Reclaimed Woods, Inc. And and started to formally network, bringing in members and connecting all the pieces of the supply chain so that we could build a brand around this thing called Urban Wood.
And so what does that look like now, the Urban Wood Network?
Well, that was Urban Salvaged and Reclaimed Woods, Inc. And so then I looked out and I started noticing that there's these other networks, these other organizations around the nation. I think Wood-Mizer sent me, it was you actually, Jake, sent me to Georgia. I don't remember who it was, but sent me to Georgia to talk about urban wood. And so I was doing a presentation on urban wood, and I met Joe Lanin from Virginia Department of Forestry. I met Rick Seward from Wood from the Hood in Minneapolis. I met Dwayne Sperber from Woodward. So I'm meeting all these people, Wisconsin, Minneapolis, Michigan, Virginia, some people in Baltimore. And I'm meeting these people. I'm going, right, they're doing the same thing I'm doing. And it was so exciting. And so we started kind of putting our heads together and going, okay, if we're really going to build a brand, we need to do it together. Not all these little pocket organizations around the nation. We need to pull our resources and really build a brand, one umbrella, one forward, phase to the world. And so in 2019, we all met together. But so we started writing standards for urban wood while we were forming this network. And so we all met in Wisconsin, kind of locked ourselves in the hotel lobby for 3 days, all these different minds from all over the nation who were working in urban wood going, how do we get this right? And one of the things we came up with was, we knew we needed a brand. What will that brand be? And that we knew we needed to keep the standards, and what will that brand be? And so what we came up with was the Urban Wood Network it wasn't even a nonprofit at the time. It was this group of 4 states who were kind of working together, and then all these other pocket groups were doing their own thing. And we decided, let's take that Urban Wood Network, which was just a program, a U.S. Forest Service funded program. Let's take that. That'll be our brand. That'll be our name and our network. But let's take the standards for the urban salvaged reclaimed woods, and let's brand those USRW, certified urban woods, and they'll work together. And that way we're not getting confused, between the two, but knowing that they're affiliated, that they work together. So now the network is Urban Wood Network. Before I even formed the formal network, the formal nonprofit, I was going out and I was really trying to market. I was pulling it all, training our competition, bringing them in, 15, 20 different people who have these great wood products. And we were trying to get them into mid-sized lumber stores here in Northern California. We were trying to get urban wood specified on plans. Actually calling out urban wood in a build, getting general contractors to use that from the ground up with urban wood. And I would tell the backstory. I would tell how this wood was rescued, how it literally was, pulled out of the landfills in many cases, how it was storing carbon, how it was, helping the environment, helping local economies, helping families. And I would tell that story, and they're all so excited, and that, they're ready to go with it. And then they go, ooh, but is it FSC certified? Is it SFI certified? How do we know it's really urban wood? How do we know the history of this wood? How do we know its chain of custody? And so and then the architects said, well, if we build it, if we specify it, not only we're not seeing any certifications, how do we know we're going to find it? Because, most urban wood producers are these smaller, segregated operations that can produce, 1,000 board foot here, 20,000 board foot there, or 50,000 here. But But people are used to dealing with very large lumber companies when they're dealing with their wood. And so I realized that, and then there was the thing of, oh, well, we tried urban wood once and we bought it and realized it started to move on us. It wasn't properly dry. And not only did it move because of moisture content, it began to move and crawl because nobody sterilized it. And so things were literally coming out of some of the wood these people were telling. And so I'm like, well, okay, those people have not been educated. So one of the things our network needs to do is education, proper drying, proper treatment, get rid of all the wood destroying organisms and how to do that. So they needed some education, but they needed a standard. And so that's how the standards came about. I realized that if we were going to take this to the next level, instead of this niche boutique size industry, we were going to need to set some standards. We were going to have sourcing standards. We were going to have a chain of custody to be able to track, that yes, this did indeed come from urban wood. Track the reason it was removed too, because people were really concerned when they started to see urban wood be used. It's like, wait a second, oh yeah, that all sounds great, but does that mean you're going to go out and just start falling all the trees in our parks and our city streets? What parameters are going to be there to protect the living trees and make sure you're only getting the trees that are coming to the end of their life cycle, hazard trees, fallen trees, and those types of things. And so we had to put standards in place to kind of protect against that. And so we wrote standards with a chain of custody that showed the arborist, the sawyer, the hauler, and the kiln, the kiln operator, if they're going to sterilize it, showed each of those pieces of the process with a standard to track, very similar to FSC or SFI. And as a matter of fact, and LEED, USGBC, the Green Building Council, and their LEED certification. So we wrote these standards that fit into all that as the answer to what the architects and the wood stores said that they needed in order to get our product used on a larger scale. But one of the things that, as we developed these standards, we started to, we were like, okay, well, we don't want to compete against FSC. We don't want to compete against SFI. So we wrote them, and then we hired an entity to go in who had a lot of experience with other traditional standards and look at how we compared to LEED certification, how we met and exceeded the standards for very high LEED certification scores, how we met and exceeded the FSC certification, and how we met and exceeded the SFI certification just using a different source. Since we couldn't get into their programs, we decided to look at their programs and develop something that worked for us that aligned with their programs. And so we have an attachment so that should FSC or SFI or any of the other organizations want to take a look at urban wood, we have a platform ready for that to just introduce right into what they're doing, or integrate rather.
That's pretty incredible, Jennifer. So can I ask, how has the before and after having the certification changed the landscape?
Well, we are piloting the certification right now. So we are what it has done is opened the doors, even though we don't have, we only have a few very small groups actually certifying to the standards right now. We're piloting it on a larger scale. And so a lot of architects, a lot of, designers, builders, and stores are really starting to take notice, and they're asking how they can get involved and how they can have a USRW certified project where they're specifying this certified wood. But remember, they have the question about, so where do we find it? If we do it. And then the sawyers were a little scared of certification because they're going, okay, paperwork, am I going to have a stack of paperwork, as high as my desk? And so there were some concerns about it, but we found solutions for those as well.
That's pretty incredible. So can we expand a little bit on what architects and engineers are looking for when they're coming to you? What are their needs? What kind of projects are we talking about? Can we hear some examples maybe along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely. We partnered with an entity out of Wisconsin, Woodward Urban Forest Products, and we did a Forest Service funded listening sessions and some Q&A, and really did some research to find out what architects and specifiers needed. We brought in large furniture, like, national brand furniture makers into these listening sessions. We brought decision makers for large campuses and hospitals, architects, designers, builders, general contractors into these sessions. And we did some research, and we brought I can't remember, not a psychiatrist, but they studied the psychiatry around using wood. So you're getting into the biophilic design and looking for those types of things. And sustainable's been a big buzzword. Now they're moving from sustainable to, it doesn't necessarily need to be sustainable, it needs to be regenerative. So they're looking for regenerative projects. They're looking to keep their costs down while having a regenerative product that makes people psychologically feel good, bringing in that biophilic design that makes people happy when they're there, but that they can do affordably and beautifully, and be able to find enough product. And so, some of the projects that have come to us have been with one of the Google buildings going in California. They were specifying, and they had very specific guidelines. They wanted wood that was salvaged, whether it was urban, whether it was forest salvage. They weren't specific, but they needed something that was not harvested for its timber value for their builds. The event that I was talking about in Wisconsin, we had Architects Institute of America come in. We did some Q&A questions. And so they're looking for, all of the things that I just stated, but they're also wanting to know, how can we find them? How can you aggregate the inventory so if we specify them, we can actually pull them together?
Yeah, absolutely. But like specifically, how would the wood be used? Is it structural? Is it furniture? Is it cabinetry? Where exactly?
Got it. So urban wood would have to, if it was structural, it would need to be graded in most places in the United States. And so some of it can be structural, but really more one-off type of things. We would have to have transient graders come out and grade the product, because no urban wood facility at this time has an on-site grader. So that would need to be graded. So most of it is going into more of the architectural millwork. The flooring, the ceiling applications, the paneling, decking, siding, big beams. I mean, we've done some large projects. We put together a timber package for one of Patagonia's builds, one of their big retail stores, and that was all out of salvaged pine timbers that had died due to drought and beetle infestation here in Northern California, and so. So that was structural, but timber frame has different grading rules, and so we were able to use that for those.
That's incredible. And when you talked about the biophilic, the way it makes you feel, there's definitely this presence when you walk into a store or you walk into a lobby, and it's not just concrete and steel. What about wood makes it feel different?
I think it's because it was living. It's warmth. It was a living tree. It was part of life. We're alive. The tree was alive, and they've done studies. It literally lowers your blood pressure when you're in a room with wood, with plants, with things that have been alive or are still alive. They've done studies. Kids who are in some form of nature in the built environment do better on tests, less anger, less crime, higher percentage of kids graduating from schools, and that's one of the reasons that the Forest Service and different groups here in the United States. One of the reasons that they're working so hard to bring trees into inner cities is to help balance that. Some of the kids, if concrete's all they see, they're not getting the benefits that a kid who's growing up in the country or in a more rural environment are getting with nature. And so bringing that nature into the cities, we can't all live in the country, so let's bring the nature in. Let's a plant. I see you both have plants in your offices. That's part of it. The plant, but also the things that are what's our desk made of, what's our cabinetry, our window casings. So a lot of different uses.
So I guess the follow-up question to that is, as the urban wood network is growing and gaining momentum, can you explain how this network is collaborating to promote the urban utilization more so, and what role does it play in the broader industry landscape?
So it's connecting all the pieces of the supply chain, and then having a brand that we can put out there. We go to different conferences and just educate. Most cities are looking for climate solutions. They have climate goals that they have to meet. They have to reduce their carbon emissions. And so what we're able to do is provide solutions to help them do that. And urban wood is a carbon storage vehicle. It's something. It's a tool that we can use. And so then one of the things that I do is I provide a various range of tools to be able to help them do that. And the Urban Wood Network is one of those tools. Is a network for education and connection, the standards for making sure it's done, a certain way. We provide sawmills to be able to mill the wood. If it's not milled, you can't, keep that carbon captured, because it'll just begin to decompose. And then kilns to dry the product. So all these different pieces of the puzzle. And then I'd mentioned before, one of the things that that the architects and the specifiers kept asking is, where will we find the wood? How will we find all the different pieces? How will we find the people who are milling wood according to these standards? And then the people doing, making the wood that didn't want their stack of paperwork, they're going, okay, how do we easily follow these standards? And I'm opening a store and I've got, 20 different suppliers bringing wood in. How am I going to manage their inventory? How am I going to know what I've got? And one of the things that people love when they buy Far West Forest Products wood, or any urban wood professionals wood, one of the things that they love is that backstory, telling the story of where this wood came from, what it's doing for the environment and the economy and the families, and the history of the wood. And so we had to come up with a solution for that. And so we developed an inventory management app, a system that pulls everything together in one nice, easy place. So we're using technology to pull all the pieces of the puzzle together. It's got an urban lumber market that's going to operate in an Amazon-style shopping experience, where all these different suppliers can have their, list what products they have, how many board feet, is it quarter sawn, white oak, is it 4 quarters, 6 quarter, and aggregate all that together. So those architects, designers, and specifiers are going to go, oh, okay, well, I need 200,000 board feet of 4 quarter, riff sawn white oak for flooring for these cafes or whatever it is, and they'll be able to pull that together and find that. So those are some of the tools that we're working to put together.
And
So
that's called Ancestry, right?
Ancestry, yeah. And it's a native app. It's been approved by Apple finally. So Apple's a tough one to get into, and it is only available in the United States and Canada, so North America right now. As we get more interest, and we're starting to get some interest from the UK, we're going to need to go back to Apple, and we've got to change the platform a little bit for every country, apparently. So.
What I'm hearing and what I loved in a couple of these examples, like the app or the store, is that you're, as an entrepreneur, seeing a challenge or a need and then finding a way or building a way to address it. And that's something that is very interesting to me personally and to a lot of folks. I mean, could you elaborate a little bit on that? Like, what drives you? Why is it that you decided to go after and solve these problems? Wouldn't somebody else be able to solve them? Why you? And I'm just curious why your personal passion for these solutions.
I have a passion for, if there's a problem, I for some reason have this thing in me that's driving me to solve the problem. And our family lumber company, it was as simple as we needed an inventory management system for ours. We needed to sell more wood. I love helping people. And so we set out to develop, these different things, to market our own products, to solve our inventory issues. I mean, our inventory was a mess. It was a hot mess. When you're telling a story, we're not just putting out the same thing over and over. We're telling the backstory on all the skips of lumber. And it might be 100,000 board feet of wood, but it came out because of this disease or this blight or this, these other things. And so we want to tell that backstory. Or, if a local government takes out a bunch of trees to protect this actually happened in the greater Sacramento area, they had to do some levee improvement. And unfortunately, these beautiful trees had to come out. Hundreds of thousands of board feet of timber are coming out of these areas. And what are we going to do with them? And so repurposing that and telling that story, what was a huge part of it. Well, you start to get, 10 acres, 20 acres full of logs, and you're going, oh, where did that one come from? and just setting those systems up to know that here's the backstory on these logs are going to be cut in this manner because here's the grade of these logs. These are more conducive to this type of material versus this type, and putting that sawing plan in a system. And then going, okay, how do we track this? How do we follow this all the way through to make sure that we know that these logs go with this lumber, just like FSC does? You have just following that chain of custody and that tracking. And so we decided to use QR code technology and scan it. And so we'll just go out with our cell phone and just scan the log and follow that all the way through. And as I'm developing this and as I'm building this, I'm thinking, well, this is a solution for me, but who else can use this? Like, literally, this entire network that we're building up can use this. All the products can go in there, and then all the products collectively can be sold. And that's how we can rescue more urban trees, support our small local economies. It's competitive. There's competition in it. Of course, we want to sell wood, and the company down the street wants to sell wood. But if we compete collaboratively, that makes me feel good. It brings out win-win. The competitive collaboration just coming together. It inspires me. I don't know. It just feels like the right thing to do.
That's incredible. One of the things you mentioned early on were those misconceptions that you had in California growing up in the assembly business. What are some common, misconceptions today in your area of expertise, in your field, the topics that you talked to us about?
One of the common misconceptions now is, still people don't understand on a large scale that we don't need to send our trees to the landfill. There are so many better uses. And of course, some of it's going to be chipped, some of it's going to be mulch. That's just the nature of it. But most people don't understand that urban wood can be just as valuable, just as beautiful, as any wood that we might have imported from another area or traditional timber as well.
And I guess when you say that, a question that comes up is what sets urban wood apart from exotic imported woods or others? So why should consumers or businesses consider, urban wood as a viable alternative?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons is it's right here in our backyard. It's very frustrating to see, and I know, Jake, you're in Thailand, so urban wood over here would not be the best solution for you. But you have urban wood right there in your area, and it's gorgeous. And so if each community, where you are, were to look at our own natural resources and begin to utilize those, it provides a little more holistic approach to life. It lowers the carbon footprint from the standpoint of transportation. We're not having to import the woods. It bolsters that local economy and just provides provides a sense of community. That it's going back. It's more cyclical. It's this full circle urban wood economies, or full circle economies in general. And so one of the things that at least here in California is we have so many different species. And I know this is true in many different places. Our woods, when you open them up, will rival exotics any day of the week. They are just stunning. And, because one of the things with urban trees is, you're bringing in a diversity of species, and so you have all these different varieties of woods.
Thank you for explaining that.
What I'd love to know is, how is this pilot coming with the standards, and maybe what are a couple things that you guys found along the way that that you're adapting, but is it going well? What are the next steps with it?
So we have a task force to review. We've been following it here. I opened a store where Urban Wood Network members can sell their wood through the store. They're following that simple chain of custody. They need to know the source, the reason for removal, and telling that path. And so through that, we did discover that there were a few things in there that were a little harder to identify. One of the things is, if it's coming from a city that has an urban forest management plan, we don't necessarily need to know the detail on every log. We need to know that, okay, this city is following these standards. They're doing what they need to do. And so aggregating those logs into more of a grouping, so you're not having to do a direct, tree to log to lumber connection on larger tracts of land. So that's one of the things that we discovered. And it's in the beginning phases of being a formal audited pilot study. We recently formed a pilot task force to follow the piloters as they go through, making sure they have a certain sampling of products, making sure that they're testing, a certain number of data points against what the standards say, and then following different pathways to get there.
Could you have guessed 10 years ago that you'd be here, talking about this today? And what were some of the reasons maybe why, that seemed far out of reach?
10 years ago today, let me see, 2013.
Well, maybe not specifically today. But
2013. No, I was looking back. I can go back to where I was in 2013, September 2013. And I had opened it was my first attempt at opening a very small store. It was before we had standards. It was before we had inventory management. You used to live down there. Well, you were more on the Santa Cruz side, in the Monterey Bay. My husband was working down in the Monterey Bay. And so I was, operating Wood-Mizer facility remotely. We kept our Northern California facility opened, and I opened a little wood store down there, our lumber store, and started testing out the concept. So to look at where I was then to now, no, I didn't. It's grown significantly, and then I was just so frustrated with the inventory it did not occur to me that I had it within me to solve that. It never crossed my radar. Matter of fact, a friend of mine, Julie Stillman, she's one of my partners with Ancestry, and I was hiring someone else to build us an inventory management system and going, gosh, what, do we really do this? And she's like, you know what I used to do for a living? and so she started to walk me through it. And I'm like, you mean we can do this ourselves? So I put a lot of faith and trust in her, but she knocked it out of the park. So.
And so what does 10 years from now look like for Urban Wood?
Yeah, 10 years from now, my hope is that to take one of our beautiful natural resources, which are trees, and throw them into the landfill would be synonymous with taking your plastic water bottle and throwing it in the ocean. It just would be so foreign, to the way that we think. And I would like to have every consumer, not just, initially my goal was across America, but now I'm like, no, this is worldwide. Every person who anywhere in the world uses wood products, and a lot of countries do this already, look to your own natural resources, look to what's right there in front of you. And also looking at, what are we using that's plastic that could be wood, and really partnering a lot more with the traditional wood world, because wood is good. Wood, regardless of the source, is just a wonderful, wonderful product to build with. All the biophilic design, that none of that matters whether it's urban or traditional. None of the sourcing matters for so many of the properties for wood. We just have another wood source as well. And so just really partnering with the traditional wood world more.
Absolutely, yeah. Can you speak to the younger generation and what opportunities there might be for the younger generation to come in and tap into forestry and wood products and opportunities there?
That's a great question. We actually had a local high school tour, the education staff, not the kids, tour to ask that exact question. Like, what do we do to encourage kids to enter this? Because there's this misconception amongst kids that every kid needs to be a doctor or a lawyer or work in an office, and not understanding that so many of the kids, especially for some, some of the more rural schools, are never going to go to college, and that's okay, as long as they learn a trade. Or maybe they do go to college and also learn a trade, but you don't have to do one or the other. And one of the things that we're doing is an internship type project here to kind of get the students' feet wet on what it's like to work with wood, what it's like to, and you don't have to do all the pieces of it. You could be the sawmill operator. Maybe if you're more of an extrovert, you might want to go into the sales side of it, and learning their own personality types and where they're coming from and their own strengths and weaknesses to find the right jobs for them. What makes them happy. And as my husband always says, what's their soul purpose, the SOUL, soul purpose. And so we actually have I wouldn't call him a student. We work with the local communities where people who have not time to serve, but community service to serve for an offense, a legal issue. We have a program here where we work with them to let them work their hours off. That helps them understand also if this is the right field for them. And then we also provide some of the personal growth coaching. So we're doing both of those together, and so we're really helping. What we think helping position them to find out what it is that they want to do.
What's one thing that you would tell your younger self to get to where you are today, and looking into the future, where you could go? Maybe something that you could tell your younger self to help you early on in your career, in your path. I
think one of the biggest things for we been actually my husband and I have been talking about that a lot lately. And one of the things that I think of often is relax and don't assume that taking the time to pause and reflect is not acting, is not doing, and is not growing. And that is such an important part. Otherwise, you're just staying so busy, you're not realizing sometimes you can be so busy, but you're going in the wrong direction. And if you never stop, pause, and reflect, how do you know that?
Well, thank you so much for coming on. And I have a feeling like we might need to have a follow-up at some point, because there's a lot of moving pieces, right? New apps, new programs, new standards, pilot projects.
Yes.
And I really happy that you came on, because how often are new standards introduced into the wood industry?
Thank you for the opportunity to interview you today, to have an opportunity to have a conversation and hear your advice, things you're working on. Excited for you in the future of urban wood. Thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation together.
Yeah, well, thank you.